Hey class, this is the lecture for our module 5, which is going to be due Wednesday, October 14th. This lecture video is going to be talking about cascading style sheets, or CSS. In the previous chapter, you learned a little bit about CSS styles and what they can do. For example, they can determine the font family or the color of a text or font size. They can do a lot of things like add borders or drop shadows. They can change heading styles and colors and sizes and things like that. So this is the introduction into that. CSS is a simple language that works alongside HTML to apply formatting to content in web pages, such as text, images, tables, and form elements. It was developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, and it creates rules or style instructions that elements on your page follow. There are 3 different locations that CSS can appear. Most often it is going to be in an external style sheet that is attached to your website. So for example, in the last tutorial we did for the Arts Council website, the styles.css is its own separate file, and it is in the root folder of the website. That's called an external style sheet. There are 2 other ways that are not as common to use CSS, and I'll just go over those real quick. So let's say we wanted to create a new website. So let's say we're going to create a new page, and we're going to save it. And I'm just going to save it in this site because I already have it open. Okay, so this page is called Untitled 5 and it's a basic HTML page. It doesn't have any content to it yet, so let's add a little bit of content to it. Let's type out, this is a heading 1 that's been styled with CSS, and I'll show you how to do that, okay? So if I highlight those words and click refresh in my properties panel, I can format that to be a paragraph or a heading of 1 through 6, 6 being the smallest, 1 being the largest. So I'm going to choose heading 1 as my format, and what that does is it places H1 tags around that text, okay? So then if I look at that heading, it looks like it's a larger text, but it hasn't been styled yet, okay? It's just black, it's Times New Roman, and it's just a large font, okay? So that is the default for H1. That's what the default H1 looks like. But if you want to make that your own, you can style it using CSS. So what I'm going to do is right now nothing is attached to this document. So we're going to go over to our CSS designer. We're going to click the plus button, add CSS source, and we're going to create a new CSS file. And under the CSS file, so I'm making an external style sheet, okay? I can call it whatever I want. .css and click OK. So I've made my own style sheet. It's going to save that in the same place where my document is saved, in the same folder, okay? So I've made my own style sheet. Now I can add attributes or selectors to it. So let's say I want this to be styled with a different font and I want it to actually be red instead of black. The way that I would do that is I would go over to add a selector, and you can use the up or down arrows to add more, to make it more specific or less specific. So we want this selector just to say H1 and press enter. So all the H1 headers on our page are going to be styled like this, whatever we choose. So we're going to go down to the text properties, and let's make our color something funky. Let's make it red. Okay, and then let's make our font family something different as well. Impact. You can change the font style if you want to italic. Font weight is how bold or how light it is. So if you choose 100, that's the least amount of bold. If you choose 900, that's the most bold. Okay, it's not really affecting this font at all. So I'm just gonna trash that setting. Font size, let's just say we want it to be large. Oh, that's actually smaller. Let's set an actual pixel value. So let's say 26 pixels. Okay, so all of our H1 headers are going to have whatever properties we choose here. Okay, so these are all the text properties you can choose. You can even add shadowing if you want to, like a drop shadow. So you can just kind of play around with some of these settings and see what you like, but all of this is adjustable. Okay, so like I added a drop shadow behind it. You can go back at any time and change these. And it's not limited to your CSS Designer panel either. If you notice up here, my HTML document has the source code and then it has style untitled.css. I can actually go and look at the code for the CSS document. So this is what's in it. It says color, colon, and then it has the hex value for the color, followed by a semicolon. Then it has font-family, font-size, font, and text shadow. So all of the H1 headers are selected right here. This is your selector, and then these are your attributes of that particular selector. So every single HTML tag can be styled on the CSS document using its selector, okay? And you can even get more or less specific if needed. You also have the option to not use an external style sheet. You can do what's called an internal style sheet. I'll show you what that looks like. So if I press enter a few times, this is a paragraph styled internally. Or sorry, I'm gonna do inline first, okay? So let's say we want this paragraph to look completely different than all the other paragraphs on the page. that's when you would want to use what's called an inline style sheet. And it's placed in the HTML code on the same line as the HTML code in the same paragraph, okay? It goes inside of the p tag. So if I'm typing the code, I'm going to type p and then space style. And then I can put my specific font colors, font sizes, and whatever. Okay, so let's say I want font size to be 10 pixels, and then I use a semicolon to separate them. Color, that's the text color. Let's say I want it to be aquamarine. And then let's say font family, let's make it Gill Sans. And then a semicolon, okay? So you're doing the same syntax that you were on the external style sheet, but you're putting it all on the same line as that particular paragraph. Okay, so once you save that, it should change it to those things, and it didn't add anything to our external style sheet. It just changed it right there on that line. That's why it's called an inline style. Okay. And then the other option you have is an internal style sheet. So I'm going to do another one. This paragraph is styled using an internal style sheet. Okay, so if I want to use an internal style sheet, it's going to appear in the head section of the document. There's going to be a tag called style. The way that you set that up is you go over to your CSS designer, and under sources, you go to define in page, and that's an internal style sheet. So it's going to go inside of the tag in the header, in the head section called style. And you can add whatever selectors you want there, just like you would on an external style sheet. Okay. So let's say we want to style this paragraph. So we'll go to plus, add a selector for P, and notice how it's adding it in the head section of the document. Okay. And let's just say for that, we want it to be purple. That is also going to style our paragraph, okay? Now, what is the recommended? I would definitely recommend using an external style sheet over inline or internal. Unless, the only reason you'd want to use an internal is if you were doing one single web page, because you wouldn't be attaching the same style sheet to all the pages, all the HTML pages. So if you were going to do one single page, you could do an internal style sheet. Inline style sheet, you could do inline style if you absolutely have to, but I would stay away from it. The benefit of an external style sheet is that the single CSS file can be attached to multiple HTML pages, and it can apply the same rules to elements in different pages. So it makes your website look cohesive, and it makes it all look like it's part of the same website because it's all styled the same. So all the H1 headers across all the pages are going to have the same attributes, and you don't have to copy and paste all those styles. You can just apply the same style sheet to each HTML page. So it maintains consistency across all pages in their site. Different types of styles can control the appearance of general HTML elements. Specific individual elements that are identified with a unique ID attribute. All elements that are identified with a specific class attribute, and even elements only within a certain area of the page. So really, the external cascading style sheet can do it all. It can do anything that you want that's specific, or it can do global attributes as well. External styles also separate page formatting from structure, and it really helps to keep your files organized, and your file reduces your file size and your server processing time. So it makes it easier for designers and coders to find exactly what they're looking for. So overall, external style sheets are the way to go. And as you go through this chapter, you're going to find that it's very simple to add styling that is for your website. So if you want to get really specific with styling an element, you can. And you can use classes or IDs to do that. You can also select elements just within a certain section of your page. So like we did in the previous chapter, we only selected the links within the nav section, or we only selected the links within the body section. So you can get really specific with what you want defined. And it keeps it all really clean and tidy in a separate CSS document. So all you need to create a CSS document is this up at the top at charset.utf8, and then you can start all your selectors, and you just use the curly brackets at the top and the bottom of all of your attributes, and your attributes have to have a colon and then end with a semicolon. If you want to see a list of all the possible attributes, go over to your CSS designer and uncheck the show set box and just look through all of these. These are all of the things that you can style. And there's even more than that that are online. So if you're missing something, or if you want even more than that, you can go to the website that I gave you, w3schools.org. Sorry, I think it's .com. Yeah. And then you can go down to the CSS section and learn CSS. This will give you a bunch of examples of what CSS can do. And then also you can go to CSS selectors to learn more about the different types of selectors. Obviously, there's a ton of different things you can do. Down here in the reference section, you can go to CSS reference, and it will give you a list of absolutely everything that can be done with CSS. So even if it's not here in the properties panel, you can still do it. Just look on this website for some options. Okay. So CSS makes it look pretty. HTML is our like building blocks or the format of the page. And then we add our content to that. And then we go in and we create a CSS document that styles it. So you can let me know if you have any questions about CSS. After you complete Project 4, you should know a lot more about it and feel comfortable with it. Thanks.